Shalom again, everybody. Rabbi Ariel here from the KosherTorah School, found online at KosherTorah.com. In our previous videos, we've been focusing on everything that's going on in the world around us, which, let's be honest, it's rather negative and for many of us, rather depressing. But there comes a time when you have to stop focusing on the negative and start focusing on the positive. And from this video forward, that's what I want to do. There's a verse in the book of Psalms, Psalm 34. The words say, Sur mera ve'ose tov, which means separate from evil and then do good. So for our previous videos, we've talked all about what we got to do to get away from the dark side. But at the same time, we got to start focusing on what it means to really embrace the light. In our last video, I introduced you to the Paleo-Hebrew form of the holy name of God. And in this video, I want to share with you more about that, more about protection from evil, and ultimately our greatest asset. And that greatest asset of them all, believe it or not, is simple hope. Hope for the present, hope for the future. Before we get into all that other stuff, let's take a minute to talk about hope. You know something? Hope is a lot more than just wishful thinking, right? Oh, I hope everything turns out okay. Okay, that's great. We all hope like that, but no. Hope is something much more deeper than that. And here is where we have to start embracing what we call the light. And the light has nothing to do with the light of the light bulb or anything of the kind. It means an expansion of consciousness. An expansion of consciousness is not an academic accomplishment. It doesn't mean learning more books. It doesn't mean memorizing more teachings. Expanding consciousness, summed up one word, experience. You know something deeper because you experience it. You can say you see it. You could say you feel it. You could say you sense it, whatever. Again, words are words. I'll share with you something interesting within our Judaic tradition. In the Talmudic tradition, the rabbinic Talmudic tradition, whenever a discussion is going to be introduced with regards to rational and analytical topics, the Gemara begins with this Aramaic phrase, ta shma, which means come and listen, because rational and analytical ideas need to be understood. We need to discuss them. We need to analyze them. And the whole foundations of everything that we know today is a scientific method. That's fine. When we get into what I get people call mystical, I don't like that word mystical because I don't think it really does justice to what the higher dimensions are. But when it comes into the greater and higher dimensions, Zoharic literature introduces another Aramaic term called ta-hazeh. Ta-hazeh means come and see, because as the saying goes, seeing is believing. And I think this is what's important, because even at Mount Sinai, if you read carefully in the book of Exodus, it says that people saw the word of God. They didn't hear it, they saw it. Because seeing touches the soul. It is intuitive. It is psychic. It is that level of consciousness above and beyond the rational and the intellectual. Now, rational intellectual deals with the outside world and how we understand it. The psychic intuitive, that is what connects us to the higher dimensions, which enable us to properly navigate this, let me be blunt, this matrix in which we're living in, so that we can actually learn the lessons for why we are put here in the first place. And if we lack that higher connection, then we're kind of disconnected. The Bible refers to being disconnected, and the Hebrew word is karet. We would translate that as being cut off or excommunicated. Now, realistically speaking, no soul No soul, none of us can ever be disconnected from the higher reality. We're all part of it. It's just that our consciousness doesn't realize that. And it's that loss of consciousness, which is the disconnection. So we're focused to try to get that back. All of what I teach here at my KosherTorah school is to focus on cultivating these psychic awarenesses. This is the old biblical Talmudic religious school, which we call Ma'aseh Merkabah, the Hechalot, ascent literature. It's how to ascend and to experience things in a holiness. And I've written many books about it, one of which is Let There Be Knowing. And it's from this book that I'm going to share with you a number of things in this video. But before we get into that, before I continue to expand on hope, remember I said Psalm 34, you have to separate from evil. Today, there's such a blurry line between what is good and what is evil. Today, most people are very upside down and confused. They've gotten to the point to think that it is good to support murder and rape and destruction and depravity. That's good. Why? Because that's what they say. That is the definition of brainwashing. For those of you who are not familiar with actual and realistic military operations, what they call psychological operations, psychops, the types of things that, special force operations do in the military, the types of thing that our government secret services around the world do, people like the CIA and MI5 in Britain and the KGB and the Mossad, although with the Chinese or whoever, whatever is out there. They work on psychological operations to try to convince people that things are true and they're not. Think of movies like Mission Impossible. I mean, that kind of stuff. Well, the movie stuff is obviously fake in Hollywood, but the attempts to globally brainwash people, that is real. Long ago, a century ago, you had people like the Nazis who developed the brainwashing techniques to a fine art where they were able to, at a national level, direct global, national consciousness. And we see that today being executed at a global level. Who's behind it, what they're doing, don't worry about it. We don't need to get conspiratorial. All we need to do is recognize that these techniques are every day out there in social media, and they were in television and programming. They certainly are in the movies and the like. You need to recognize these things and see how they influence you. Now, long ago, I wrote my book, Protection from Evil. And I outline, let me take a step back. The original name of the book was The Occult Mechanics, because I wanted people to understand how the occult works. It's not mumbo jumbo, it's not magical, and there's nothing to be afraid of. But like every other walk in life, there are pitfalls, there are problems, and you need to know how to navigate them. That is why Protection from Evil was written, to explain the mechanics of the occult so that we can overcome them. I hear many people today who like to practice what they call the dark arts, Satanism and ritual magic and the like. And, I try to be knowledgeable of all things so I can at least speak somewhat intelligently about them. And I've done my research into these topics, and I've looked at the modern materials. I'm sorry. Some of them are just so ridiculously unfounded and ridiculously false, and what they consider to be real. My goodness, they've taken levels of fairy tales, outright fairy tales, silly stuff, and they elevate it, make it into what they believe to be something real. Not only is it not something to be feared, it is rather something to be mocked, because it's just outright silly. Are there those who know the dark side well and know how to manipulate it, and therefore to manipulate others? Oh, you betcha they're out there. Very, very much so. They're the power brokers behind what's going on in the world. And you know something? Darth Vader, the character from Star Wars, he was right when he said, and of course I can't put on a good James Earl Jones voice, you don't know the power of the dark side. And you don't, because their greatest asset is concealment. They hide what they do so as to manipulate the minds of people. And that's exactly what's happened. The younger generation, because they lack education, they're told what to think, but not how to think. And as such, their minds are mush. And if we're going to have some kind of cleansing on the earth, well, who do you think that cleansing is for? If these vessels are completely broken, their minds, that is, then they're going to have to be swept out with the trash and recycled. We call reincarnation the Gilgule Neshamot, the recycling of souls. If that is their destiny, then they will not escape it. We need to recognize the occult mechanics and evil and protect ourselves from it. We need to have the hope to know that this is real. And what is that hope? Like I said, it is the beginning of your connection with your own higher self. There is a part of you, the greater part of you, which right at this very moment is existing in higher dimensions, experiencing higher realities, interacting with higher beings. But for the most part, we are completely oblivious to these realities. We deny them because we're much more involved with the, quote, more important things on what's happening in social media. That's the distraction. That's the psych ops. That is the dark side. And it's all around. And the only way out is to get rid of it. Now, I don't mean you have to disconnect your computer, but you have to learn to see it and see through it. A good example, if you want a metaphor, you might remember the famous movie, The Matrix. And in the last scene of that film, one of the last scenes, the character Neo has been told that if you die in the Matrix, then you're dead. So he died in the Matrix. And he's sitting there dead. And he wakes up and says, I'm not dead. I'm alive. It was a lie. And he looks around, and instead of seeing the facade of the Matrix, all he sees is computer code. I'm sure you're familiar with this very, very famous scene. Well, the reality of life, I don't think, is a computer code. But then again, whose computer is really running? Well, that's another story. But that is a good example to help us realize the falsity of what we think is real. And the only way that we connect to what is real is to access those levels of higher consciousness within us. In our previous video, I shared with you the original form of the name of Hashem, the name of God, that was known in ancient times. It's called the Paleo-Hebrew form. And how to use it, well, like I said, in my book, Let There Be Knowing. I didn't call it Let There Be Knowledge. Let me rephrase. I don't need you to have knowledge. Knowledge comes from academic, rational, acquisitions. You want knowledge? Go take a course. But knowing is the experience of it. That's why it's called knowing, because I'm trying to instruct you how to know it, how to experience it for yourselves. And in that respect, I have a whole section in that I wrote a long time ago about how to actually pronounce the holy name of God. It's not a secret. It's not been lost. But because it was considered powerful, the sages, by divine guidance, recognized that it couldn't be put into the hands of just anyone. Consider it like a loaded gun. A loaded gun is only dangerous in the hands of those who are not trained or not ready to use it. But in and of itself, it's not going to hurt anybody. So understand here that what the holy name of God does, it doesn't give you magical powers. You're not going to be able to do crazy things like you might fantasize. But what it can and will do is open up that access within your subconscious to reach your unconscious, to tap into your own higher self. We say we are created in the image of God. Lovely metaphor. But when we recognize what the name of God, Yud Ke Vav Ke, really means, that each letter is actually a code, and how we decipher the code, open up the code, and use the code, which is opening up and using the holy name, this is how we can access our personal, individual avenues to higher consciousness and the higher realities. And those who can master this and become a master of, and quote, the good name, this is when you can become what we call a Baal Shem Tov, a master of the good name. Again, not about magic, not about hocus pocus. Don't allow your fantasies and imaginations from the dark side to make you drift off into fairy tales. No, got to stay grounded. Psychic development and psychological development are one and the same. You need to understand that. That is why we work so hard to clean out our personal and individual subconsciouses. This is why when we see a spirit of dullness of mind, look at what it's led to. The poisoning of minds, the poisoning of hearts, and rampant hatred which runs around. In a previous essay, that's what I do here, I write. In a previous video, I gave you the example of the samurai who, by the code of Bushido, has to execute his activity without an individual ego. And that is a great lesson for us. If you go look at the previous video, if you want to learn that story, we need to recognize that this spirit of hate is a lie. Are some people doing bad things? Yeah, you're right. A lot of people are doing bad things. It's just the way it is. But not all people. Whether you like it or not, there are good amongst everybody, including those who we choose not to like. And I have to tell the equal truth. There are a lot of bad guys, even amongst those who are of our own. You got to admit that. The real separation of good and evil is not going to be by defining a cultural group, an ethnic group, a national group, or a religious group. It's going to be done as heaven has always done it, by knowing the individual souls of the person. And that's where it boils down to. And those who will connect to the holy name. And why this holy name? Because that word holy has meaning. The Hebrew word, of course, is kadosh. What is kadosh? Holy. Really? Does it have to do with religion? Yeah, but it's more than that. The universal constant of properly calibrated and balanced universal energy. That is what we call holy. The human being in our physical and higher forms have to calibrate with that. And that calibration will put us in contact with the universal force, the source of which is the creator, this name Yud Ke Vav Ke, the name of God. That is what it means to be holy. Now, to be holy is not a philosophical pursuit. It's not an academic accomplishment. It doesn't matter how religious you are. It matters how you live your life. Your sexual balances, which is why we do not go off into the multiple expressions of immorality that we see so prevalent today. Why we place such emphasis on proper eating and, what we call in Hebrew kosher food. No, it does not mean that you have to support every kosher item that's out there, but it does mean you have to know and understand proper eating, proper balance, what foods are conducive for higher consciousness and which are not. Eating blood for example, always brings down human consciousness to an animal level, which is why we're very emphatic not to eat blood, which is why we do not eat meat that has not been properly slaughtered with the blood removed. Now, is that an obligation for everybody? No, not everybody has to achieve this consciousness by requirement, other than if you want to ascend. You want to ascend and get yourself properly balanced and get dusha, holiness, then fine, that's what we do. It's your choice. I'm not here to tell you what to do or not to do. But I am going to tell you that we can get through the dark times if we have hope. You want to develop your psychic abilities, it starts with having hope. You have to believe that this is true. You have to believe that it can be done. You have to believe that beyond this darkness that is falling upon us now, a new dawn will arise. And that new dawn is the voice of your own higher self, making its way through your multiple layers of your subconscious to get you to listen to what it has to say. And that is why we so desperately need to take the time to be quiet, to be calm, to detach from this crazy world and all of its distracting, intentionally deceptive lies, which are perverting people's minds and hearts, filling them with hate and violence, and, of all things, distractions. Sur mera, separate from it all. You know, I watch a lot of the other YouTube guys out there, and I've seen certain parties go from being good to being borderline bad because they're eating up this public media nonsense, and they're literally being seduced by the dark side. And it's a shame, because I know in their hearts that they're otherwise good people. So for those of you who are listening, if I'm speaking about you, as they say, if the shoe fits, separate from all this nonsense. Don't take sides other than the side of light and the side of God. Because if we stand united, we're gonna disagree on theologies and doctrines, and so what? Who cares? All of those theologies and doctrines and beliefs, those are all the fruits of the tree of knowledge, good and evil. And if you remember, the tree of knowledge, good and evil, is what messed us up. We got to return to the tree of life. That's found inside. And that inside is guarded by the subconscious, which we need to cleanse out. And then we can gain a glimpse, a glimmer from the inside, our own psychic, intuitive connection. When we can make that voice clear, that is the voice that in our Hebrew tradition we call our Magid, your spiritual guide. And it will guide you to where you need to be, how you need to get there, when you need to get there, etc. That is the voice of hope within you. Pay attention to this. Cultivate this reality within you. Get through these hard times. Because this is, like we've been sharing, the ultimate separation. Those who are going to look up and gain or regain our psychic connection through the tree of life, and those who are going to still cling to the tree of knowledge and good and evil, because it's time to chop down that tree. And those who cling to it, well, I guess you're going to go down with the tree. What can I say? It's your choice, but not to fear even that. Why? Because you'll be reincarnated, and whether it'll take another 1,000,000 or 2 or 10 million years, 10 million cycles of reincarnation, you'll get it right. But if you choose to go through all of those future lifestyles of suffering and oppression so that you will learn how to cling to the light, well, I guess if that's your choice, then don't worry about it. I mean, we'll all be there in the end, in the higher dimensions, once you get through the matrix of all your self-imposed sufferings and darkness. But once you choose not to self-impose them upon you, then you will walk the way of light out of it. That's where we are at collectively right now. And so on that note, let me conclude My books are available on Amazon, of course. My book, Knowing, not only has information, but it has practical techniques, how to use names, how to create psychic barriers of protection, and all the like. This is there, and it's written for everybody. But again, separating from evil. You got to know what it is so as to know how to get away from it. Again, on Amazon, if you want them, it's up to you to take steps to make it so. So let's focus on the positive from now on. Let's have hope. Let's build it. Let's, like an ember, blow on it so it will combust and burn out the darkness. Yes, you don't know the power of the dark side of the force. So it's time that you got to know it, not personally to embrace it, but personally so as to stay away from it. Because forever will it dominate your destiny. Forgive me that I'm quoting movie lines, but those are probably the things you know more than the lines of ancient wisdom. So let's take it from there and hopefully move forward into the light. If you want to come study with me, our school is open for all students who want to come and join us. Contact me through my email. If you like, of course, this video, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, all that YouTube stuff that you hear everybody talking about. But the focus, again, is the reconnection. Let's focus more on that. Thanks again all for joining me. God's blessings. See you all on our next video. Shalom.